We will work till 4:30, so we are starting the panel now. The title of the next panel is Use of AI in Georgia, Legislation, Challenges and Prospects. We have seen how international institutions see the AI use in public administration and in commercial sector and private sector. And it's interesting, of course, to look at Georgian situation. Private, it's difficult to analyze private sector because cooperation with them can be only voluntary from their side, and therefore we are analyzing public sector mainly. We hope we'll be able to analyze private sector as well in future, and to cover this very important. I'm very pleased that we have representatives from different sectors with rich experience. And IDFI would like to share their second research on use of AI systems in Georgia, legislation and practice. And we are analyzing AI used in the country. And because all this is new and the challenges are new, it was difficult to find information, especially on how such systems function. And that's why we had active communication with the target institutions of our research. We had 2 working meetings with them, and they are here with us today. Thank you very much once again for your interest, for your activity, and we hope that in future more institutions will share information with us on this topic. And some did not give us a comprehensive answer, although we thought they did have AI. So that's why we don't have documented evidence, and it's difficult to judge. And now I would like to introduce our second panel participants, Georgi Davitouri, Project Manager, IDFI, Information Development and Freedom of Information. And he with David Aristavi, he is the author of the research. This research was published today, together with international overview prepared by NADA. Before coming to IDFI, Georgi worked as an advisor at Constitutional Court of Georgia. He is he has 8 years of experience of working in public sector. Georgi is also author of many analytical reports on the legal framework and also on general courts. So he has big experience of working in general and constitutional court. Here we have Mr. Otar Gorgodze, Financial and Supervision Technology Development Head from the National Bank of Georgia. He was participating in automated machinery risk management system development. At the National Bank, he worked on many interesting initiatives, including Financial Innovations Office and key communication channel for the National Bank, innovative approaches of working with startups, Think Lab, InnoLab, supporting new technologies, and he has huge experience of working on the most modern technologies, and National Bank is very dynamic there. As I have mentioned in the beginning, although we don't have access to information regarding use of AI in private sector, you have this information. For example, you know, the National Bank of Georgia may know what are the IA used by businesses. So that's why your participation in this discussion is important. Beka Kenkadze is also our participant. He is head of Department of Supervision of Functioning of Public Sector at Inspector's Office. He is the contact person and member of KHI. From 2013, he works at State Inspector's Office in different positions, and he's working on the protection of personal data, huge experience. We have representatives from academia, Hatuna Burgadze, professor, Business and Technologies University. And she has big scientific and research experience. Mrs. Hatuna has graduated from diplomacy school. She was Fulbright stipend winner for Massachusetts University. She also worked at Columbia University, Bard University invited professor, and that's why academic view by such a prominent professor, it's also very interesting. We also have here academia, civil sector, government, regulatory body represented by the National Bank, and personal data protection inspector's office, because there are many issues that are connected to technologies and protection of personal data in the use of technologies. So this is the biggest challenge that we face in today's digital world. Now I would like to pass floor to Georgi Davitouri, and he'll speak about key findings of the research. And Georgi, please be mindful of the time that you have. If our dear audience is interested in more details, it's available on our website. Georgi, the floor is yours. Thank you, Levan. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to speak very briefly about research conducted by IDFI, key findings. As Levan has mentioned, this is about Georgian public sector, and we are focusing on Georgian public sector, use of AI, and practical examples, and legal approaches. So what is the legal framework? How legal framework sees the use of AI by private sector? First of all, I'll speak about the approach, about methods that IDFI has used to obtain information about artificial intelligence. First of all, I would like to say a few words about the methodology, which is not flawless, although we did everything. We had meetings and we sent requests to make sure we receive as much information about AI as possible. But finally, when we have identified institutions, we sent a public information request to 54 institutions. 36 have replied, 18 have not replied at all to our queries. And 36 institutions give the following. 24 said they do not use artificial intelligence, while 12 gave information about different analytical programs. When we looked at them, in 5, we saw that yes, they use different modules of artificial intelligence, and this was mainly automated machine learning and deep learning. And according to the institutions, this is the picture. Categorization is law enforcement agencies, and we must say that they have the most developed, well, in Georgia, the most developed systems, and also tourism and education. And at the same time, all those cases of AI is under the executive branch of power. We didn't have a single case of use of AI in legislative branch, in judicial branch, and at the same time, we didn't have any case of use of AI at the level of local government. So just briefly, to speak about technical opportunities that have been identified for AI. First, this is video analytics, and the Ministry of Interior uses it. It's face recognition and license plate recognition. Also, tourism national administration is using and has used the so-called sentiment analysis, so-called NLP technology. It gives a chance to read emotions from the text, and automated content creation used for translation memory to facilitate translation process, and also augmented data analytics, which is IA-based so-called big data logical links and patterns identification. And finally, in terms of security, whatever is connected to data loss prevention. And just in general, we must say that none of those systems have been developed by our institutions. All have been procured or a part of software has been procured. So the key finding is that law enforcement agencies are most familiar in extracting AI-based analytical capabilities in Georgian public sector. And as the agency and state security service, they did not confirm that they have AI. And what does it mean they have not confirmed? Actually, they said they do not have AI, and they have not. It's not that they don't share the information; they confirm they do not have AI. So this real system is one of the best examples of how public service uses AI. In Georgia, we have 5,000 smart cameras providing video surveillance. They are integrated with face recognition and plate recognition systems. And this is managed by one agency, which is 112. And we don't know whether this is the only office who has access to this system. Also, since the end of 2020, the Prosecutor's Office of Georgia has implemented IBM program software, several modules based on IA. Whatever you see on the slide, this is IBM website. This is software, key data and functional possibilities. This is the screen. The prosecutor's office, they have not shared more information, more detailed information on the use of those technologies. Now I would like to pass to general trends related to legal framework in Georgia. And first of all, what is obvious and we would like to mention is the special legislation mode for AI or other ICT technologies is not functioning in Georgia, however. It is a very legal practice. It does not mean that AI is left beyond regulation and public administration can use AI to their taste and their liking. At the level of law and practice, AI is considered just as regular software solution, increasing efficiency of work of governmental institution, and it does not cover the risks that use of IA can bring in. The notable risks like transparency and concordance with law, for example, key human rights. This is done through traditional legal mechanism, which is, from the point of view of transparency, does not meet the challenges brought in by introduction of modern technologies and modern IA. And finally, I'd like to say about two key recommendations that we have at the moment. The IDF, I would like to share those recommendations. First of all, increase the analytical capabilities of the government and law enforcement agencies in particular. We must say that it is growing and shall be balanced. It shall be balanced, should be balanced. And it should be balanced by relevant mechanisms to safeguard against the risks that uncontrolled use of AI can bring in and abuse and misuse of AI. It may happen, we know, and it may, the worst thing that can happen, it can go against the principles of democratic states. Therefore, all international documents, and I would like to focus at feasibility study that is the final product of Dahai, and it offers risk-based approach to use different words, how strict IA use should be controlled and how strict the requirements toward the use of AI should be, and how high should be the guarantees for safeguarding key rights. And they should be relevant to the level of development of AI and use of AI. And finally, it must be said that it's important that agencies that use AI be more proactive and make more information available about the systems they use. Lack of information about the systems is bad from any angle, and the biggest risk that may be caused is implementation of AI and discreditation of AI systems. For example, at the level of key rights and the minimum legal regulations, for example, how long the video record can be stored according to the analysis of law that we made, there is no answer. And there are many other things that make the process very untransparent, raises a lot of questions, legal questions and analytical questions. whether use of modern technologies are used rightfully or unrightfully, especially video surveillance system, and the and what are the guarantees and what are the risks? Have they been identified completely? Because in the end of the day, it may question the credibility of the whole system. And we must mention that we do need to have legal framework, at least for public sector, on minimum legal requirements as it comes to the risks related to violation of human rights and freedoms. Thank you very much. This is what I wanted to share with you. And of course, I will answer all the questions. Thank you, Georgi. And we try to do our best time-wise. Detailed report will be available on the website, and how many requests we have sent out to how many entities, what were the answers, and what was the finding we could make based on those answers. Of course, we will have also time for questions and answers, and you can go back to any question. You can send your questions to Q&A, and we will answer. I think Georgi mentioned the decree of the National Bank on regulation of AI systems. I think this is seldom decree, seldom why, seldom legal act where the word AI is used at all for Georgia, and therefore I'd like to pass floor to Mr. Otar Gorgodze to share the work of National Bank of Georgia in this direction and what are the key challenges and prospects that you see in this regard. Mr. Otar Gorgodze, please, floor is yours. With great pleasure. Of course, thank you very much for the invitation, for the very interesting report. I'm very pleased that we are starting in-depth discussions. There are a lot of issues that need to be resolved, and the doing it right is important. When it comes to our approach, the National Bank of Georgia, artificial intelligence is interesting in two regards. In financial sector, we need to facilitate its use, and for us, for efficient implementation of our functions, if there is a potential of use, we must use it. Well, the advantage of AI is a big topic we are looking at, and for that we have special tools like Financial Data Office for innovations, for communications, and they come with different ideas, and we think whether this or that thing is doable in financial sector, etc. We also have a new tool, so-called regulatory lab, for new technologies and new products where they are tested, and anyone can come and bring documents that was not regulated, and we see how to adjust it to a regulation and vice versa, whether regulation has to be changed to make the environment regulated. So unfortunately, we do need the tools because financial sector is the most regulated sector, not only in our country, in any other country. And when it comes to financial industry, use of artificial intellect is now blooming, and things have been done in our country as well. Well, I can't say someone is much more advanced than us. We are all moving in this direction. And especially important is to look at the problem from the point of view of access to finances. Because if we want to speak about economy of scale, because of economy of scale, financial service is expensive because of fixed costs. FIC process, for example, who is your user, what are the risks, offer products, adjust it to your user, give advice, prepare documents, etc. So all that are fixed costs. And if someone wants a loan of 100,000 or 10,000, these are fixed costs. And of course, when we give advice, service is expensive. And when we are doing small scale, banks and financial institutes have to spend fixed amount on small amounts as well. So that's why artificial intelligence gives us possibility to make the whole exercise cheaper. And the so-called machine advising thing and digital trace, digital signature is becoming more popular. And when we process this information, we can do similar analysis that credit expert had to do and spend a lot of time and ask many questions about family income, etc. And some things can be done in an automated manner at a cheaper cost. And what is the most important, since this model exists, it can be scaled up. So you can prepare experts and then it will be like a rollout of the whole system. So finally, when we speak about access to finances, it has huge prospects. That's why banks are interested in these investments and they are interested to support the development of AI. As we saw that in financial sector, this was starting, we decided not to lag behind. And a few months ago, we published the guidelines for management of AI and ICTs. And this is our first interaction. I think that from now on, we will do it every year. This was very basic this time. And there is no like a standard, clear standard. So we want to see where it will all head to. And e-ethics becomes important. And we thought that it's a bit too early to speak about ethics, as there are other problems to be resolved first. And again, as we are do like our job as well, we don't have ready products in this regard. We are experimenting so far. We have a scientific hub, science and research hub, and we have some trainings, etc. And the key goal is to see the goal, how to use different models. For example, two main directions. You know, there is a lot of information from financial institutions. They send tens and thousands of units of data, and verification and validation is difficult if you do it manually. And we have a project that artificial intelligence looks at those forms, templates, and does things much quicker than a person could have done it. For example, two sides of balance should match, like just an is simple example, yeah. And in this regard, we have a project, second project, also very interesting, machine readability support. We had several pilots. We have tried to introduce regulations, machine readable programs, but it's not very straightforward. We do have success, but failures as well. For example, if you have small text, it's easy for machine reading. But when the text is big, it's difficult. For example, it's like 1, 2, 3, 5 steps. It's difficult to NMP models to read it. And we need to build in additional metadata. It's interesting thing. And finally, it's possible to add additional checkpots to the software, and it will help to do like automated connections between the systems. It's also very important to say that we have a lot of data, and we have a window of opportunity to researchers. We can invite researchers to work with us, of course, based on legal agreement. But, well, of course, we can't share personal information. We can share aggregated information. So we do try to be transparent and open in this regard, and to analyze what is happening in financial sector and what is the key challenge in terms of machine learning. The key topic is data. Data, because machine learning needs a huge amount of data, like GPT-3 model, you probably have heard about it. So practically it's like it has the whole internet read and analyzed to write one sentence. Yeah, just imagine the complexity of the issue. So we don't have that much digital data as much as, to say so, access, exit and entry of this data, interoperability of those data, because data collected in one place should be readable by another source, and the frame for exchange. There is another problem, too much commercialization, because somewhere you may have some data which is free, but if you try to do machine processing, suddenly there are other mechanisms that it is not free of charge anymore. It's a kind of commercialization. So, well, it's not a big problem, but too much commercialization when you need much information may be a problem. And we need to mention, in terms of exchange of data, there is interesting initiative Open Bank project, and there are several directions. High standard for exchange of personal data, and exchange of data should be done based on openness. And we think that in this project this year we will do some key work and exchange data between the banks, and we will have licensed feedbacks, and banks will be able to get information from banks. If all ends well, we think it would be possible to think about expansion of this project to other industries. It will be interesting. What is the key principle? Ideally, I'm treating your data as I'm treating your bank account, yes? So very high standards of protection. And
მონაცემები ხო ტელეკომი რა ვიცი უთილი თავრობაში ხო და შეიძლება ეს ძალიან მოწესრიგებული ჩარჩო იყოს ამ მონაცემების მიღების გაცვლის და შემდეგ მანქანური სწავლებისთვის
for machine learning. So, and finally, I'd like to say that we all know that the most successful companies, including those that collect data and develop AI, and there are interesting trends, and we can be sure that the need for AI will increase, and our competitive advantage is important, and that's why we need to do it as soon as possible. And I think that your report is an important step on this big road, and I hope there will be a follow-up from your side, our side, for the better future for all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rotar, very much indeed for sharing your experience. It's very important, very useful for all of us, and practical, what is the most important, and very interesting at the same time to look at it from this point of view, from managerial point of view, from the point of view of financial institutions. One thing is how public administration uses it, and second is how financial sector uses it. Maybe sometimes it's more active and more advanced. So let us move forward with our discussion, and let us enrich our discussion even further and bring in protection of personal data issue to the context. And we know that IT development actually creates risks.
რომ პანელზე ჩვენთანაც არის სახელმწიფო ინსპექტორის სამსახური წარმოდგენილი ბატონ ბეკა.
So we have Mr. Beka.
თავის გამოცდილებას ხედავს ამ ინსტიტუტის რა როლი აქვს ამ დაწესებულებას ამ სფეროში და როგორია ქვეყანაში ამ მიმართულებით კანონმდებლობა და პრაქტიკა. ხო ბატონ ბეკა.
მოგესალმებით. ისმის ხო ჩემი ხმა? პირველ რიგში დიდი მადლობა მინდა გადაგიხადოთ ორგანიზატორებს ესეთი
I would like to thank the organizers for a very important discussion, for giving us well, when we speak about modern technologies and artificial intelligence and functioning, data is very important, especially big amounts of data. And more data than needed, etc., can cause violation of human rights, like right to personal life. And in today's reality, we are working in digital world. We visit different websites. For example, we use our smartphones. We share our applications and websites. So this type of data gives bigger chance for someone to use our data. And here is a danger that something may happen and our fundamental rights may be violated. And artificial intelligence processes data. And if we enter a word in a search engine, then it will see the result, but before that, it processes huge amounts of information. And in this process, the data is of the utmost importance, because it's not only the product that we are looking for, but when they exercise the algorithm, that's where your data is used, because more information they have about you, the better their systems work. So on one hand, developers have to think about how to see the balance, and on the other hand, to think how to regulate it so not to impede development of technologies. And I would like to assure you, and I'm sure you will agree, there are the dangers that we speak about but IA can bring a lot of good for the humanity. So this is a dilemma that is always there between developers and users, and we need to weigh all cons and pros. And the state inspector is participating in AHAI, and it has been mentioned many times. I will try very briefly to revise a legal framework. It will be interesting. Today, the law on personal data covers key principles related to AI, ICT, and this is transparency, security, principle of minimization of the data use, storage, etc. So it may be controversial with the existence of systems like artificial intelligence, because developers have to process data in a transparent manner, but complex technologies come in contradiction with this principle. In addition to fundamental principles, I'm sure you all know that the State Inspector's Office submitted a new law on protection of personal data to the Parliament of Georgia, and we have these expectations that this law will be adopted soon. This law, and one of the factors is that existing law, when it looks at new technologies, actually failed to satisfy the new requirements. And the 108 plus convention introduces definitions, and that's why the law has to be adjusted and was adjusted, and now has definitions like profiling, for example, profiling during automated decision making, that decisions are made without human interference. So profiling, as I said, it is connected to artificial track, which means that information, personal data of individuals are collected and analyzed. And as a result of profiling, there, for example, future behavior can be analyzed, or their abilities. And today, profiling is used in the private sector. Financial institutions use it to analyze, to see whether people are capable or paying the loans back, and also participation of subjects, and of course the subjects can ask the developers, and developer must give information as to what information is processed about the person. However, the law made the position of subjects stronger, and they have a law by GDPR and 108 plus convention. We have a right to refuse to be profiled and to be subject to automated decisions when we think it creates financial or other big impact. in this case, the data processors have new obligation to ensure that data subjects receive information about the form, how we can request human participation and involvement, and not to be dependent on machine analysis. And also, developers have another obligation, several aspects I'd like to highlight. Also, considered by GDPR and 108 plus. This is privacy impact assessment, which means that data processors are obliged by law to conduct regular checks to make sure that product developed by them is working the way it was supposed to work, and there are not processes that are not under their control, and data is processed against the legal provision. So this is a big obligation for developers, and also what is important, new obligations with regards to privacy by default, which means that data processors, when they have a product and they prepare the product, they should think about protection of personal data during the product development, but in the process of development of the product, they have to think about it in advance. And why is this important? If a data processor respects this obligation, it will be easier for him to produce such a product that will satisfy the requirements of law from the early start. Why is it so important? If they discover errors late and their product is not privacy friendly, etc., and they discover it, supervisor discovers it later, for example, AI system discovers that human the subjects can be penalized, but it's also about reputational damage that they may face. And we all know cases when big companies, in addition to compensation of damage, it was very bad for their good name and reputation. So thinking about those responsibilities in advance, and if they consider the whole process, they will not face the risks when some unforeseeable violations can happen. So this was just very brief overview of novelties in the legal framework. So if there are questions, we can answer later. Yes. Thank you very much, Becca, for very interesting practical information. Yes, indeed, data is important, and we have to remember that Google, Facebook, and other big corporations, when they create systems working on AI and they process our data daily, and not only in our country, in Europe, and everywhere all over the place. It was interesting to have this overall discussion. And this will, now Mrs. Khatuna's academic experience will certainly enrich our discussion. Hello. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me and for a very interesting research when it comes to development of AI. We need a strategic vision, and we see the modern reality. The time brings changes. Today we live in digital world, and The state has to develop strategic vision, and the modern reality has to be taken into account, especially now when the role of technologies significantly increased during COVID. Now we see that we may see I'm sorry, there is such a noise.
ნაბიჯების გადადგმას. მით უფრო მცირე სახელმწიფოებისათვის, იმიტომ რომ ჩვენ მცირე სახელმწიფოებმა ჩვენი საჭიროებები უნდა ვანახოთ დიდ მოთამაშეებს. ეს ერთი და მეორე მხრივ კიდევ უფრო მეტად გავაძლიეროთ შესაძლებლობები, რათა უპასუხოთ თანამედროვე გამოწვევებს სათანადოდ. და სწორედ ამიტომ განსაკუთრებით საინტერესო არის მცირე.
That's why the example of small countries is interesting, and I can share Estonian example who found its own niche in terms of cybersecurity.
მოიცავს სამ მნიშვნელოვან პრიორიტეტს. პირველი ეს გახავთ სამართლებრივი ჩარჩოს შემუშავება იმისათვის, რომ სწორედ ავტონომიური კომპიუტერული სისტემების დანერგვა მოხდეს სხვადასხვა სფეროში, ისე რომ ჩვენ დავიცვათ ეთიკის ნორმები, უსაფრთხოების ნორმები, ვიცოდეთ ვინ არის პასუხისმგებელი, როგორ ხდება გადანაწილება მოთამაშეებს შორის უფლებამოსილებების და ბუნებრივია აქ შესაბამისი რეგულაციები გვჭირდება. მეორე მიმართულება ეს გახლავთ სწორედ ხელოვნური ინტელექტის დანერგვით ხელი შეუწყოს ელექტრონული მმართველობის განვითარებას, მაშინ როდესაც ჩვენ შეგვიძლია 2 საათში მოვიპოვოთ დოკუმენტი, რატომ არ უნდა მივმართოთ ელექტრონულ სისტემას. მოგეხსენება ტრადიციული პროცედურების თანახმად შეიძლება მოქალაქეს ერთი მარტივი დოკუმენტის მისაღებად დასჭირდეს 4-5 დღე, მაშინ როდესაც ელექტრონული მმართველობის განვითარება და ავტომატიზირებული სერვისები, მათ შორის საიტების გაერთიანება, ჩვენ გვაძლევს შესაძლებლობას, რომ 2-3 საათში ან უფრო უმოკლეს პერიოდში მოვუგვაროთ მოქალაქეს პრობლემები. და სწორედ სტრატეგიული ხედვა გულისხმობს ამ მიმართულებით ელექტრონული მმართველობის კიდევ უფრო მეტად განვითარებას. გარდა ამისა, ის გულისხმობს ხელოვნური ინტელექტის დანერგვას გადაწყვეტილების მიღების პროცესში. რა ფორმით? როცა ჩვენ ვსაუბრობთ, რომ ჩვენ ვცხოვრობთ მონაცემების ეპოქაში, აქ უმნიშვნელოვანესია დიდი მოცულობის ინფორმაციას თქვათ როგორ მართავთ და გამეთანხმებით ალბათ იმაში და გამოითქვა კიდევაც არაერთი მოსაზრება იმასთან დაკავშირებით, რომ დია ხელოვნური ინტელექტი სწორედ აი ამ მონაცემების დამუშავებაში გვეხმარება. და მესამე არანაკლებ მნიშვნელოვანი პრიორიტეტული მიმართულება აღნიშნული სტრატეგიული ხედვის მიხედვით გულისხმობს სწორედ საზოგადოებაში ცნობიერების ამაღლებას ამ საკითხების თაობაზე, იმიტომ რომ ხელოვნური ინტელექტი დღეს არის რეალობა. მეტიც, მას გამოიყენება სხვადასხვა სფეროში, დაწყებული ჯანდაცვით, გაგრძელებული სოფლის მეურნეობით, განათლებით, მეცნიერებით, უსაფრთხოებით და შესაბამისად ეს თქვათ ამ შესაძლებლობების შესახებ მოქალაქეები უნდა იყვნენ საკმაოდ ინფორმირებულები, თუმცა ასევე ჩვენ უნდა მივაწოდოთ ინფორმაცია გამოწვევების შესახებ. გარდა თქვათ ესტონეთისა, მე გამოვყოფდი ასევე საფრანგეთს. საფრანგეთი როგორც წესი ხელოვნურ ინტელექტს იყენებს მასშტაბურად ჯანდაცვის სფეროში, ასევე საავტომობილო ინდუსტრიაში ხელოვნური ინტელექტი გამოიყენება წარმატებით. მეტიც, საფრანგეთის მთავრობის გადაწყვეტილებით 2022 წლისათვის ხელოვნური ინტელექტის განვითარებისთვის გამოიყოფა 1 მილიარდზე მეტი თანხა, დაახლოებით საუბარია 1,5 მილიარდ ევროზე და აღნიშნული თანხიდან 700 მილიონი ევრო უშუალოდ მოხმარდება კვლევებს. გარდა ამისა, როცა ჩვენ საუბრობთ ხელოვნური ინტელექტის სტრატეგიული ხედვის განვითარებაზე, ჩვენ კარგად უნდა გვესმოდეს, რომ აქ საჭირო არის სექტორალური მიდგომაც. და ამ თვალსაზრისით გამოყოფდი ბუნებრივია ევროკავშირის ხედვას, როგორც ზენაციონალური ელემენტების მქონე რეგიონალური საერთაშორისო ორგანიზაციის ხედვას, იმასთან დაკავშირებით, რომ სწორედ წევრ სახელმწიფოებმა უნდა შეძლონ კოორდინირებული სამოქმედო გეგმების შემუშავება, იმისათვის, რომ განსაზღვრონ, თქვათ, დარგობრივი განვითარების ხედვა და ვიცოდეთ, თქვათ, როგორ ვიყენებთ ხელოვნურ ინტელექტს ჯანდაცვაში, სოფლის მეურნეობაში და სხვა, თქვათ, მნიშვნელოვან სფეროებში. გარდა ამისა, როცა ჩვენ სტრატეგიულ ხედვაზე ვსაუბრობთ, აქ მნიშვნელოვანი არის, როგორ ვიცავთ ადამიანის უფლებებს. და ამ თვალსაზრისით, რა თქმა უნდა, მისასალმებელია სწორედ ევროკავშირის ხედვა, იმასთან დაკავშირებით, რომ დიახ, ჩვენ ერთი მხრივ ხელოვნური ინტელექტი გვჭირდება ჩვენი გარემოს გასაუმჯობესებლად, მაგრამ მეორე მხრივ ეს ისე უნდა გაკეთდეს, რომ არ მოხდეს ფუნდამენტური უფლებებისა და თავისუფლებების ხელყოფა. ანუ ეს უნდა მოხდეს ფუნდამენტური უფლებისა და თავისუფლებების დაცვა. რატომ არის ეს მნიშვნელოვანი? იმიტომ რომ თუ ჩვენ კვლევებს თქვათ გავაანალიზებთ, კვლევების თანახმად ავტომატიზირებული სერვისები ასევე იწვევს სამუშაო ადგილების, თქვათ, შემცირებას იმ თვალსაზრისით, რომ ხელოვნური ინტელექტი იკავებს აღნიშნულ ადგილს. და აქ როგორ უნდა დავიცვათ ჩვენ შრომითი უფლებები ინდივიდების, ეს არის ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი კითხვა. შესაბამისად, ამ კითხვიდან გამომდინარე ჩნდება შემდეგი არანაკლებ მნიშვნელოვანი კითხვა. რა ტიპის ფარგლების განსაზღვრა გვჭირდება? სანამდე შეიძლება ჩვენ ხელოვნური ინტელექტი განვავითაროთ, იმისათვის, რომ არ დავარღვიოთ ბალანსი, ერთი მხრივ გამოვიყენოთ ხელოვნური ინტელექტის შესაძლებლობები, მაგრამ მეორე მხრივ დაცული იყოს ფუნდამენტური უფლებები, მათ შორის შრომითი უფლებები. ასევე აქ ჩვენ ვსაუბრობთ გამჭვირვალობის, ანგარიშვალდებულების საკითხებზე, რაც თავისთავად მოითხოვს ნებისმიერი სახელმწიფოსგან, რომელსაც სურს ხელოვნური ინტელექტი განავითაროს, შესაბამისი ხედვის ქონას. მე ვფიქრობ, რომ დროა ჩვენ ვიფიქროთ აქტიურად, როგორც სახელმწიფომ, ციფრული პოლიტიკის განვითარებაზე და ამაში, რა თქმა უნდა, აკადემიური სექტორის, აკადემიის წარმომადგენლების როლიც გამორჩეულია იმ თვალსაზრისით, რომ ჩვენ გვყავს არაერთი სპეციალისტი, რომელიც იკვლევს ამ საკითხებს და სწორედ მათი ჩართულობით და საბჭოთა და კერძო სექტორის, მათ შორის უნივერსიტეტების ჩართულობით შესაძლებელია დავიწყოთ ფიქრი ციფრული პოლიტიკის სტრატეგიის შემუშავებაზე და აღნიშნული კოლგის ქვეშ შევიმუშაოთ სტრატეგია იმის თუ როგორ ვავითარებთ ჩვენს ციფრულ მმართველობას მომავალში და შესაბამისად ამ კოლგის ქვეშ როგორ მოვიაზრებთ ხელოვნური ინტელექტის განვითარებას. გარდა აღნიშნულისა, უნიშნელოვანესია, თქვათ, აკადემიურ სფეროში განვავითაროთ შესაბამისი სამაგისტრო პროგრამები და არა მხოლოდ სამაგისტრო პროგრამები, იმისათვის, რომ ხვალ ქვეყანას ჰყავდეს ის სპეციალისტები, რომლებიც უპასუხებენ თანამედროვე შრომის ბაზრის მოთხოვნებს. იმიტომ რომ ციფრული პოლიტიკა და ციფრული დღის წესრიგი სulis არა მარტო ჩვენი ცხოვრების წესს ინდივიდების, არამედ თავისთავად ეს გულისხმობს უკვე შრომის ბაზრის მოთხოვნების შეცვლას, შესაბამის ციფრულ უნარებს მოითხოვს, რაც უკვე ჩვენ კარნახობს იმას, რომ სწორედ აი ამ სტრატეგიის კოლგის ქვეშ უნდა ვიფიქროთ ასევე იმ საგანმანათლებლო პროგრამებზე, რომლებიც მომზადებენ იმ სპეციალისტებს, რომელთა მეშვეობითაც ჩვენ განვავითარებთ ჩვენს ციფრულ პოლიტიკას და მათ შორის ხელოვნურ ინტელექტს, როგორც ციფრული მმართველობის, თქვათ, ხელშემწყობ ერთ-ერთ მექანიზმს.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Khatuna. And there was interruption. Unfortunately, we could not hear you properly, but I personally could hear you well, and I understood everything, and I totally agree with you. And of course, the strategy is needed, and By the way, there is one very interesting question in our Q&A, and quite rhetoric. And what is the need to speak about AI if they are not using it in our country? Well, there is a need because, in the private sector, they do use AI today, and I don't know how actively, although, and in general, when we speak about regulation, it's a vision. These are the rules that have to be used by the systems and will be used as the systems will develop. So we have to start thinking earlier. We have to start thinking about strategic document, for example, electronic governance, national strategy, or other conceptual document to develop countries' vision, how the country is going to develop. And in public administration, in IT technologies, how it will be used, and digital choices to be made by the country. And that is why the European countries are so successful, because they do not change reforms as it goes, but they have vision and they have long-term plans. And that's why they are quite successful. Now we have 15 minutes to go, and there are very many interesting questions, and I will use the position of a moderator, and I will ask 2 questions myself to participants of the panel, to Georgi and to Becca. I would like to ask you, please, very briefly, tell us a few words about your own recommendations with regards to use of AI, because it is very important indeed. Your vision is important with regards to challenges, and we have conducted the research and we had recommendations based on your findings, and I will ask Georgi to say a few words about it, and also Becca, please share from the point of view of the Office of Personal Data Protection Inspector. And after you answer those questions, we will try to answer very interesting questions that we have received in our Q&A panel. So let us do it this way to manage the time probably. So you see the questions in chat, Georgi and Becca. Yes, Levan, thank you very much. I will speak very briefly, and I will answer the questions in Q&A. The key recommendation that I have from our side is to define the rules of the game, minimum framework, not very detailed regulations. It's impossible to define detailed regulations at this point of time, but like a rule of the game, and not to be based on the approaches that have been developed by EU and the Council of Europe, and it has been described very well in the previous presentation. For example, one related to transparency and protection of key rights, and depending on what is the risk that the system creates. And we have, for example, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a criminal department. They have a hotline system, which is not connected to big risks. However, they use artificial intellect. But on the other hand, we have Ministry of Interior 112, video surveillance, and they have bigger risks in terms of violation of human rights. So based on the risks, we have to define rules of the game in the public sector for transparency, especially at this stage. And at the same time, it has to happen quickly, because we want to avoid improper business processes that might be in place, as Becca said, in the private sector, in the public sector. we don't want wrong business processes because it's much more difficult to change the business process. And we have an example when a lot of resource has been invested in so-called wiring system, and a big resource has been wasted because it has been challenged in constitutional court, and this issue still remains open. So for everyone it's better, and for the state hood development it's better to have rules of the game from the early start. Also, I would like to answer the first question about the municipalities and the municipalities, whether those AI and ICT software can be installed. Some are lagging behind, and due to many reasons, AI use is not happening there. Yes, this is part of the problem. But for example, today I'm in Batumi, and in Batumi you have internet, no problem at all. But there are no services, and these services have to be introduced. And chatbots, it's a very good example. It will take the burden of public services, burden of answering all queries. And with regards to timing of storage of records by video surveillance, one person said that it is there is a provision defining maximum timeline. Well, honestly, we did not look into legality or lack of legality of those surveillances. We did not look at it, but there is a clear example of why transparency is needed. The time of storage of personal data, especially in the systems where artificial intellect is involved. This is the key issue that has to be considered. 1 month or 3 years, it makes a huge difference to the rights of persons. Not in a single normative act submitted to us by the Ministry of Interior, we could find information in this regard. State Personal Data Protection Inspector's Office has looked into the surveillance system and discovered many violations and issued many violations in all aspects, by the way, everywhere they looked. And they have not even looked at face recognition. They looked at general surveillance and plate recognition. So this is another example why we need transparency. If we do not know, and we will not know about all those issues that might be connected to violation of our basic rights, we may miss things and draw wrong conclusions. So the key recommendation is to establish rules of the game at the early stage and ensure high standard for transparency. Thank you, Becca. You, please. Gmadlov. So I will also try to speak briefly, and I don't want to use like dry legal definitions. I will give you a vivid example to show how easy it is to face some difficulties if we don't tackle issues from the early beginning. There was one big problem, one employment program of big company using AI. They gave a preference only to men. And when they started looking into this issue, they discovered that the algorithm that was installed into the software, they gave only best qualities of men, points that are related to men. And as there were probably better women candidates, they didn't have other characteristics of a man, and they were screened out. So discrimination happened because of a simple error. And I will try not to speak about the principles anymore, principles that are needed actually to safeguard the systems and to make sure that the systems are intact with law. But I'll give you just general recommendations. It would be good if we follow the best practice, international best practice, which says that the developers of AI at early stage, they should have consultancies with the stakeholders. And from this point of view, our office is ready to offer them advice and receive a free of charge consultation. Another best practice is from international experience again, when we speak about big companies, to create a certain independent experts group or committee in any format. They would look at the product before it is launched, and they will give advice, or they will give relevant legal aid to the developers of the system to make sure that this is ethical, in concordance with human rights, etc. And also, one of the recommendations based on our law is that the data processors have to create alternative ways for people to be involved, and this should be a simple process for the execution. And finally, I would like to mention quickly as well is education and professional trainings that to me seem to be very important. The developers, producers of the service have to do it. If they retrain developers and their employees in the direction that we are speaking about now, for example, on human rights, on protection of personal data, etc., when they develop the process, when they develop the product, they will start thinking about it from the early start, and then we will not face the problems of that example that I gave you a few moments ago. So now let us summarize. Our office is quite open. Any person who is willing to work on those issues can address us. This is quite a big priority for us, and you will probably agree with me, and there are representatives that participated in the meetings that we have launched, and we have launched several working groups, and you are members of those working groups, so you are welcome to continue this participation. And very briefly, I would like to reply to the question that was related to like why so many organizations are needed. You need 50 organizations when you have few organizations, you have to create the formats, because when you have 50, it may be too late. And the round tables that we have organized, and you are organizing, and others as well, and we are also planning to carry out some inspections in private sector and in public sector. So the 2021 will be quite busy, so I hope we will continue our cooperation with you and everyone who is interested and who is involved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Becca. So I would like to ask a question that was about personal data, and I would like to answer it. The question is as follows. In general, information collection is for key purposes. Do they have a right to use the data not only for the key purpose, but for other purposes, so-called secondary purpose? Is secondary use of data allowed? And AI system data is there. Is it allowed to use this data for secondary purposes? Whether this can be controlled, and where is the right balance to strike? So very briefly, and then Mr. Otar Gorgodza, question is to you. So just in general, these are always individual cases to be looked at, but the limitation of target is one of fundamental principles of the law. The data has to be developed only for clearly stated targeted goals. So if the data is used for another purpose, it has to go through the relevant screening. For example, the consent of the subject. So this is one of the important principles of the. If this is neglected, this is like current law. You don't really need to change the current law because it is already there. And when data is collected for a purpose, it can't be used for a different purpose. So if anyone would like to use data for another purpose, the informed concern of the subject should be obtained from the beginning. Again, so Mr. Otar, there are questions to you as well. They are wondering when did the National Bank start active work on the introduction of AI? Well, just how much time did it take you to get to where you are?
თვითონ შიგნით თუ არის ორგანიზაციის
Yes.
შიგნით საუბარი
Inside the organization, when we speak about, well, we have science and data hub. We created it 2 years ago by enthusiasts because there were many people who were interested in artificial intelligence that this data was used for different analysis. And then this team of people like thinkers, think tank and scientists, we developed it further. When it comes to regulated institutions, so when we saw that they are using some machine learning schemes, and it became necessary to create a frame for that in order to manage risks. When we realized as what was happening, we tried to create the relevant legal frame. And also, in general, we are keeping an open eye on what is happening outside. There are supervisors that spend a lot of resources in this regard. For example, Singapore and Britain, and they spend a lot. They are at the front line in data science and use of AI. And they use quite advanced models. And it's very interesting for us as well, the models that they use. And I'm not going to list them, but we can think about borrowing them, yeah? We are members of so-called Global Financial Innovations Network, and we are members and we see our peers and we consider and we discuss what, where worked well, what was problematic, etc. And we try to share with each other and to share best approaches with each other. So what is the most important here? Of course, those who are at the front line, we are not at the front line together with them, but we'll catch up with them. It's easy to catch up because the tools are practically available, and these are open source tools. You can actually download it from the hub, and young people are interested in it especially, and we open vacancies for students, for PhD students, for master degree students on use of technologies. And when we see that there is an interested person, we try to get him on board and continue cooperation. This is very important. And just to summarize, if we young people like it a lot, yes, and tools are there in the open source, and they are libraries, and this stuff is free. And organizationally, if you resolve some issues, you can really have very good cooperation, at least at the level of basic elements, and organization can do this analysis in-house. Thank you very much. Let us answer one more question. I will try. Quite interesting question related to security and openness, transparency and security. This dilemma is always there. And as we researched this issue, we had a case when the other side said that they did not believe that data should be available, anything that relates to use of IT, because it creates issues related to security. Of course, some logic is there, but there is logic on the other side as well. There is rationale on the other side as well, when we are demanding open, transparent rules of the game. And when we spoke about selection of judges, that the process should be open. We don't just ask to open the code for the sake of open code. No, it's about legal action. Like we want to know how our judges are delegated and nominated, etc., and selected. And this is important for the supervision of the process. Who can change something in the code, yeah, according to the order or legal act, who has access, who has the right, what is the procedure. So sometimes things are simple but should not depend on someone's goodwill or badwill. And as we are researching this topic, we have requested internal policy documents on how AI use is regulated inside their institution. This is like internal manual of the system. How should the process be managed? How to safeguard the system from inside? And obviously, a lot of work has to be done, like protection of personal data and the internal regulations that apply, etc. So this issue also has to be considered somewhere for a start. And let's start thinking about it, because the research showed that vision has to be elaborated, and our discussion has this purpose specifically to start talking, to start the debates, to make sure that it's not too late when it comes to violation of rights. I'd like to say that there is big interest towards this issue, and there are so many people listening to us today, and it means that interest is quite high, and we will try from our side to continue working with you. We hope to continue our good cooperation, and we are willing to cooperate with you. We think that this should be a multilateral process involving academia, businesses, private sector, NGOs, state around the issue when we speak about the rules. Everyone should participate to safeguard against the risks and facilitate the development of our country, not to lag behind the developed countries, and to be competitive. I would like to thank all of you. I would like to apologize for being one moderator for both panels. So I would like to wish you peace and health. Thank you very much to all the participants. Thank you very much to our interpreters. Thank you to our panel members. And thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. This discussion will be available online. You can revisit it and watch it. And the research that we have mentioned, 2 reports are already available on our website. You can visit our website for more details.